The storm had been building for 3 days. I could feel it in my bones before the first clouds darkened the horizon, that electric tension in the air that made my skin prickle and my pulse quicken. The other women in the village said I was imagining things, that my sensitivities were just another way I didn't quite fit in. They weren't cruel about it. Not exactly. Just dismissive. The way you'd pat a child on the head and tell them their invisible friend isn't real. But I knew storms. I'd always known them. My mother used to say I was born during a lightning strike, that the midwife had counted the seconds between my first cry and the thunder that shook the rafters. "You came into this world fighting," she'd told me, her fingers gentle as they braided my pale hair. "And you'll leave it the same way." She'd been gone 5 years now. Sometimes I still reached for her in my sleep. The cattle field stretched before me, a vast expanse of trampled grass and mud that bordered the dark line of forest to the east. This was pack territory, werewolf land, and I had no business being here. The village girls whispered about the wolves who ruled these mountains, about the alpha king who could tear a man apart with his bare hands, about the ancient laws that kept our two worlds separate. But cattle don't care about laws, and neither, apparently, did storms. I'd been walking the perimeter road when I saw them, maybe 200 head, bunched together near the forest edge, their eyes rolling white with panic. The wind had picked up, whipping my hair across my face, and the smell of rain was so thick I could taste it, metallic, wild, dangerous. They were going to bolt. I knew it with the same certainty I knew my own name. The fence line was weak there. I could see the posts leaning, the wire sagging. One good surge and they'd stampede straight into the forest, into territory where even wolves feared to go during storms. The old growth there was treacherous, full of ravines and sinkholes. They'd die, maybe not all of them, but enough. I should have walked away. Should have hurried back to the village and pretended I'd seen nothing. What did I care about werewolf cattle? What did I owe these creatures who'd marked their borders with warning signs and growled threats at anyone who crossed the invisible lines they'd drawn around their world? But my mother's voice whispered through my memory. Compassion isn't about deserving, little one. It's about choosing. The first fat drops of rain hit my face as I climbed over the fence. The cattle were massive up close. Shaggy highland breeds with curved horns and thick coats made for mountain winters. They shifted and stamped as I approached, their panic palpable. I kept my movements slow, my voice low and steady. "Easy," I murmured, even though the wind stole the words from my mouth. Easy now. I'd helped with the village livestock since I was tall enough to reach a cow's flank. I knew how herd animals thought, how they moved. Fear was contagious among them, spreading like wildfire from one nervous heartbeat to the next. But calm could spread too, if you introduced it right. If you became the stillness in the center of the chaos. The rain came harder now, turning from drops to sheets in seconds. The cattle bellowed, pressing closer to each other, a seething mass of muscle and terror. Thunder cracked overhead, not the distant rumble I'd heard all day, but something immediate and violent that seemed to split the sky. The fence groaned. I moved without thinking, placing myself between the cattle and the weakest section of wire. Stupid. Suicidal. But my body acted on instinct, arms spread wide, voice rising above the storm. "Hey! Hey!" Some of the cows at the front actually stopped, heads swinging toward me. I locked eyes with the nearest one, a big female with a white blaze down her face, and held her gaze. In my peripheral vision, I could see the others beginning to settle, just slightly. The herd mind wavering between flight and curiosity. "That's it," I breathed. "That's it, girl. Nothing here to fear. Just rain, just noise." Lightning split the world into stark white and shadow. In that frozen moment of brightness, I saw them. Wolves. Massive shapes emerging from the tree line, moving with the fluid grace of predators who feared nothing. 5 of them. No. 6. Their eyes caught the lightning, reflecting it back in shades of amber and gold. My heart stuttered. Every survival instinct I possessed screamed at me to run. But running would spook the cattle, and spooked cattle would bolt, and bolting into a pack of wolves. So I stood my ground, rain streaming down my face, watching the wolves circle closer, They moved like water, like shadows, like something that existed between the physical world and dream. The largest one, a massive beast with fur so dark it seemed to absorb light, stopped 10 feet away. Our eyes met. I'd heard stories about werewolves, about the intelligence that lurked behind those animal gazes. Looking into his eyes, I believed every word. This was no mindless beast. This was something ancient and knowing, something that had probably killed more times than I'd drawn breath. The cattle shifted restlessly behind me. One wrong move, and this would turn into a bloodbath. "Please," I heard myself whisper, though the storm swallowed the word. "Please, not like this." The great wolf tilted his head, studying me with an intensity that made my skin burn despite the cold rain. Then, impossibly, he stepped back, not away, just back, creating space. The other wolves followed his lead. Together, moving with eerie coordination, they began to circle the herd. Not attacking, not threatening, guiding. The cattle, sensing the presence of predators but confused by their behavior, began to move. Away from the fence, away from the weak points, deeper into the pasture, toward higher ground. I stood frozen, watching pack dynamics I couldn't begin to understand. The wolves worked like they'd done this 1,000 times, cutting off potential breaks, directing the flow of the herd with nothing but presence and positioning. In minutes, the cattle were clustered on a rise 100 yards from danger, still nervous, but no longer panicked. The dark wolf returned to me. He was even bigger up close, his shoulder easily reaching my chest. Rain plastered his fur to his body, revealing the raw power of the muscle beneath. He could kill me in seconds. We both knew it. Instead, he did something that stopped my heart entirely. He bowed his head, just slightly, just enough that the gesture was unmistakable. Then he turned and melted back into the forest, his pack following like smoke on wind. I stood there shaking, from cold, from fear, from something I couldn't name, as the storm finally began to ease. The cattle settled into their uncomfortable huddle, alive and safe. My clothes were soaked through, my hair hanging in rats' tails around my face. I'd just saved a werewolf's cattle, and he'd known. Not just known, he'd helped. Had coordinated with me like we were part of the same pack. The walk back to the village felt like moving through a dream. My limbs were heavy, my mind spinning with images of amber eyes and impossible grace. No one would believe me. I barely believed myself. By the time I reached the village outskirts, the storm had passed completely, leaving behind that peculiar clarity that comes after violence. The air smelled clean and new. Somewhere, a bird was singing. I was almost to my cottage, a small structure on the edge of the village proper, the kind of place they gave to people who didn't quite belong anywhere else, when I heard the commotion. Voices, urgent and afraid. I changed direction, following the sound to the village square. A crowd had gathered, tight and tense, and in the center, my breath caught. 3 men stood there, but they weren't men. Not entirely. They wore human form, but something in their bearing, in the way they held themselves, screamed predator. Werewolves. In our village. Breaking every treaty and tradition that kept our world separate. And the one in the center. The one who commanded space simply by existing. Whose dark hair was still damp from rain. His eyes found mine through the crowd. The same amber gold I'd seen in the storm. The same ancient, knowing intelligence. "Her," he said, his voice carrying despite its quietness. "The woman with pale hair. Bring her to me." The crowd parted like water, every face turning toward me with expressions ranging from fear to confusion to something that looked almost like accusation, as if I'd done something wrong by being noticed, by being singled out. My legs moved without permission, carrying me forward through the gap in the crowd. Each step felt like moving through honey, like time had thickened around us. I stopped 3 feet away from him, close enough to see that he was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with features that were almost beautiful in their harsh symmetry, close enough to see the way his nostrils flared slightly, as if he were scenting me. "You were in my pasture during the storm," he said, not a question. I swallowed hard. Yes. You saved my cattle. I tried to help. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. You didn't run when you saw us, my pack. The cattle would have bolted. Most humans would have let them. I had no answer for that. Around us, the village held its collective breath. The Alpha King, because that's what he had to be. Nothing else could explain the sheer presence he radiated. Stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell pine and rain, and something wild I had no name for. "What's your name?" he asked, and his voice had gone softer, almost gentle. "Elena," I whispered. "Elena." He repeated it like he was tasting the syllables. "I am Rowan Stormheart, Alpha King of the Northern Pack." He paused, and when he spoke again, every person in that square heard him clearly. "I came here to thank the human who saved my herd, to offer reward and recognition." My heart hammered. That's not necessary, but I find myself curious. His eyes held mine, and I couldn't look away. You speak to cattle like you speak their language. You stand between them and harm like your pack. You face wolves in the storm and don't scream. He tilted his head, exactly the way he had in his wolf form. "Tell me, Elena of the pale hair and steady heart, what are you?" The question hung in the air between us like lightning waiting to strike, and I had absolutely no answer that would make sense, because I didn't know what I was. I'd never known. I was just me. The girl who didn't quite fit, the one who felt storms coming and heard things others couldn't, and found herself in impossible situations because something in her refused to look away from suffering. "I'm no one," I finally said. "Just someone who couldn't walk away." Rowan Stormheart studied me for a long, breathless moment. Then, impossibly, he smiled. "No," he said quietly, so quietly that maybe only I heard. "You're not no one. You're something I've been waiting for my entire life." Before I could process those words, before I could do anything but stand there with my mouth slightly open, he turned to address the crowd. "This woman is under my protection," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Anyone who harms her answers to me. Anyone who threatens her dies." He let that sink in for a heartbeat. "She will come to my territory tomorrow. There is something she must see." Then his eyes found mine again, and this time there was something almost playful in them, almost warm. "Prepare yourself, Elena," he said. "Your life just changed." And with that, he and his companions shifted, a ripple of transformation that was there and gone so fast I might have imagined it, and vanished into the forest as wolves, leaving me standing in the square, soaked and shaking, while every person in my village stared at me like I'd just sprouted wings. The thing was, I couldn't shake the feeling that they might be right to stare, because something had changed, something fundamental. The storm was over, but I had a feeling mine was just beginning. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw amber gold staring back at me through the rain, felt the weight of words I didn't understand. "You're something I've been waiting for my entire life." What did that even mean? My cottage felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in as I paced from window to door and back again. Outside, the village had gone quiet. That particular kind of silence that comes when people are whispering behind closed doors. I could imagine the conversations, the speculation, the fear. Elena, who already didn't fit in, had now attracted the attention of the Alpha King himself. I was either blessed or cursed, and no one seemed sure which. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, I was already dressed. Simple clothes, a sturdy dress in dark blue, leather boots that had seen better days, my hair braided and pinned back. I looked at my reflection in the small, warped mirror by the door and barely recognized myself. My eyes looked too large, too bright, my skin too pale. I looked like someone waiting for the world to end, or begin. The knock came at exactly sunrise. I opened the door to find not wolves, but a woman. She was tall and striking, with copper-colored hair pulled back in an intricate braid and eyes the color of moss. She wore leather and wool like armor, and there was something in her bearing that said warrior even before she spoke. "Elena?" Her voice was surprisingly gentle. I'm Sage. The Alpha King sent me to escort you to the Northern Territory. Is that normal? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Sending an escort? Sage's lips quirked into something that might have been a smile. Nothing about this situation is normal. She gestured to the forest road, but Rowan wants to make sure you arrive safely. And comfortably. There are those in both our worlds who might not appreciate this meeting. The implication settled in my stomach like a stone. You mean someone might try to stop me? I mean someone might try to hurt you. She met my eyes directly, no softness now. The king's interest in you has stirred up attention. Not all of it good. So yes, I'm here to make sure no one gets stupid ideas. I grabbed my worn cloak from its hook, my hands only shaking slightly. I don't understand why he's interested at all. I just helped some animals. You did more than that. Sage waited while I locked my door. A useless gesture in a village where everyone knew everyone. But habits die hard. You entered pack territory during a storm. You stood between valuable livestock and death. And when you encountered werewolves in their true form, you didn't run screaming. She started walking, and I fell into step beside her. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How significant? I was too scared to run, I admitted. But you weren't too scared to stay. She glanced at me sidelong. There's a difference. The forest road was beautiful in the morning light, dappled sun filtering through leaves that were just beginning to turn with the season. We walked in silence for a while, leaving the village behind. I kept expecting someone to call out, to stop me, to demand explanations I couldn't give. No one did. Can I ask you something? I finally said. You can ask. I might not answer. What does he want from me? Really? Sage was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't respond. Then, I think he wants to understand you. Rowan he carries a lot of responsibility. The weight of an entire pack, of treaties and traditions and 1,000 expectations. She pushed a low-hanging branch aside, holding it so I could pass. I've known him since we were children. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you yesterday. My cheeks flushed. He doesn't know me. Maybe. Or maybe he recognizes something in you that you don't see in yourself yet. We walked for 2 hours, climbing gradually into the mountains. The forest grew wilder here, older. Trees that must have stood for centuries stretched toward the sky, their bark thick and gnarled. I could hear water somewhere nearby. A stream or river, the sound of it constant and soothing. This was true pack territory. I could feel it in the air, in the way the very earth seemed to hum with presence. We're close, Sage said, as we crested a ridge. And then I saw it. The pack compound wasn't what I'd expected. No primitive hovels or crude shelters. Instead, a collection of beautiful wooden buildings spread across a natural clearing, designed to blend with the landscape rather than dominate it. Large windows caught the morning light. Stone chimneys rose from peaked roofs. Gardens flourished between structures, and I could see people, wolves in human form, moving about their morning routines. It looked like a home, a real community. Welcome to Stormheart territory, Sage said, and there was unmistakable pride in her voice. As we descended toward the compound, heads turned, conversations stopped. I felt the weight of dozens of eyes, felt the curiosity and confusion and, yes, hostility in some of those stares. A human. Walking freely into their sacred space. Sage's hand touched my elbow, steadying. Stay close. And remember, you're under the Alpha's protection. No one will touch you. The main building was larger than the others, built from timber so dark it was almost black. We climbed wooden steps to a wide porch, and Sage pushed open doors that were carved with intricate patterns. Wolves running, trees growing, storms breaking. Inside was a great hall that took my breath away. The ceiling soared overhead, supported by massive beams, a fireplace large enough to stand and dominated one wall, already burning despite the mild weather. Furs and woven tapestries decorated the walls, and the furniture, heavy wooden tables and chairs, carved with the same beautiful detail as the doors, spoke of craftsmanship that had been passed down through generations. And in the center of it all, standing before the fireplace with his back to us, was Rowan. He turned as we entered, and the impact of his full attention in this space, his space, nearly staggered me. Yesterday, in the village square, he'd been impressive. Here, surrounded by his power and his people, he was something else entirely, magnificent, terrifying, utterly commanding. Elena. My name in his mouth sounded like poetry. Thank you for coming. Sage bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect, and withdrew, leaving us alone in the vast hall. I stood there, acutely aware of my simple clothes, my worn boots, my pale hair that couldn't quite be tamed no matter how tightly I braided it. Next to his raw power and presence, I felt like a candle next to a wildfire. "Are you afraid?" he asked, moving closer with that same fluid grace I'd seen in the storm. I considered lying, decided against it. Yes. Good. He stopped a few feet away, giving me space. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you honest. His head tilted in that now familiar gesture. But you came anyway. You said I had to see something. I did. He gestured toward the far end of the hall, where another set of doors stood closed. But first, I want to show you something else. Something that might help you understand why I asked you here. He led me through those doors and out onto a rear terrace that overlooked a spectacular view. The compound spread below us, and beyond that, rolling pastures where I could see the cattle from yesterday grazing peacefully. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow. Beautiful, I breathed. My family has protected this land for 15 generations, Rowan said quietly. We're not just predators, Elena. We're shepherds. Guardians. Those cattle you saved? He pointed toward the distant herd. They represent months of careful breeding, years of building relationships with neighboring territories. They're food security for my pack through the winter. They're trade goods that maintain our alliances. He turned to look at me. You saved more than animals yesterday. You saved lives, relationships, peace. I swallowed hard. I didn't know. Exactly. His eyes held mine. You didn't know, and you still acted. You put yourself at risk, walked onto pack territory during a storm, faced down wolves who could have killed you, because you couldn't walk away from suffering. He moved closer, and I could smell that wild scent again, pine and rain, and something uniquely him. Do you know what we call that in pack culture? I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Heart, he said simply. True heart, the rarest quality in any creature, human or wolf. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and when I didn't, his fingers brushed a strand of hair that had escaped my braid. My grandmother used to tell me a story about a time when there would come someone who could bridge our worlds, someone who carried the courage of wolves and the compassion of humanity. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Someone who would save us when we didn't even know we needed saving. My breath caught. That's just a story. Maybe. His hand dropped away. Or maybe yesterday, standing in that storm, you proved it wasn't. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted from inside the hall. Raised voices, angry and sharp. Rowan's entire demeanor changed in an instant, relaxed to alert, warm to commanding. Stay here, he ordered, already moving toward the doors. But I couldn't. Something pulled me forward, made me follow him back into the great hall, where chaos had erupted. A dozen wolves in human form had gathered, and in their midst, 2 men were restraining a third, a young man, maybe 20, with wild eyes and blood on his hands. Found him trying to breach the eastern boundary, one of the restrainers said as Rowan approached. He attacked the patrol, wounded 3 before we brought him down. The young man snarled, actually snarled, his humanity slipping as rage consumed him. They killed her. They killed Mara, and you do nothing. You sit in your hall and play politics while she lies cold in the ground. The name hit me like a physical blow. Mara. I knew that name. Everyone in the village knew it. A werewolf woman who'd been found dead 3 weeks ago near the border. The circumstances had been suspicious, violent, and clearly not resolved. Rowan's face could have been carved from stone. Connor, you know the law. We investigate through proper channels. We don't attack patrol members. Proper channels? Connor's laugh was broken, jagged. It's been 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and you've done nothing while whoever killed her walks free. His eyes, when they found me, burned with hatred so pure it stole my breath. But you have time for this. For her. A human, in our territory. While Mara... He lunged. Fast. Impossibly fast. But Rowan was faster. He moved like lightning, intercepting Connor before he'd closed half the distance. The sound of their collision echoed through the hall. Flesh on flesh. Power meeting power. Rowan didn't just stop Connor. He dominated him, forcing him to the ground with a strength that was terrifying in its controlled precision. Enough. One word, but it carried the weight of absolute authority, of an alpha command that couldn't be disobeyed. Connor struggled for a moment, then went still, his chest heaving, tears streaming down his face. I loved her, he whispered. I loved her, and someone took her and you. You're doing nothing. Something in Rowan's expression shifted. Softened, just slightly. Take him to the holding rooms, he said to the others. Not as a prisoner, as someone who's hurting. Get him food, water, someone he trusts to sit with him. He looked down at Connor with something that might have been grief. I haven't forgotten Mara, Connor. I will never forget Mara, but justice requires patience. And proof. They led Connor away, still sobbing, and the hall slowly emptied until it was just Rowan and me again. He stood there, shoulders tense, staring at the place where Connor had been. He's right, you know, he said finally. I haven't found her killer, haven't brought justice for a member of my own pack. His hands clenched at his sides. I have 100 responsibilities pulling me in different directions, and sometimes I feel like I'm failing at all of them. Without thinking, I moved closer. You can't be everything to everyone. I'm supposed to be. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw past the power and the authority to the man beneath, tired, lonely, carrying burdens that would break most people. I'm supposed to be strong enough, smart enough, fast enough. I'm supposed to protect them all. You're one person, I said softly. I'm an alpha king. It's not the same thing. We stood there in the great hall, surrounded by the trappings of power, and all I could see was the weight crushing him. Why did you really bring me here? I asked. It wasn't just to thank me for the cattle. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, because when I saw you in that storm, standing between my herd and danger, I saw something I haven't seen in years. He met my eyes. I saw someone acting without agenda, without politics or power plays or hidden motives, just pure compassion, pure courage. His voice roughened, and I thought, if she can do that, if she can be that in the middle of a storm, maybe she can show me how to do the same thing. My heart thundered in my chest. I don't know how to show anyone anything. I'm just someone who couldn't walk away, he finished, echoing my words from yesterday. Yes, that's exactly what I need. Before I could respond, Sage burst back into the hall, her face tight with urgency. Rowan, we have a situation. His entire body tensed. What kind of situation? The eastern boundary. Something's crossed into our territory. She glanced at me, hesitation clear in her eyes. Something that's killing livestock, systematically. 5 cows dead in the last hour. The color drained from Rowan's face. Show me. We moved as one. Rowan, Sage, and despite every logical protest, me, through the compound, past curious wolves who watched with wary eyes, toward the eastern woods where the boundary markers stood ancient and proud. The scene was carnage. 5 cattle lay scattered across the pasture, their bodies torn open with a violence that went beyond hunger or hunting. This was rage, destruction, something that killed for the joy of killing. Rowan knelt beside the nearest cow, his fingers gentle as they traced the wounds. His face was unreadable, but tension radiated from every line of his body. Not wolves, he said quietly. The pattern's wrong. The wounds are wrong. Then what? Sage asked. He stood, scanning the forest line with eyes that had gone pure predator. I don't know. But we're going to find out. He turned to me. Elena, I need you to... I can help, I interrupted. The words came out before I could stop them. With the cattle, the ones still alive, they'll be terrified, scattered. If you don't gather them quickly, you'll lose more. It's not safe. It wasn't safe yesterday either. I met his eyes. Let me help. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse. Send me back to the compound, or, worse, back to the village. Instead, he studied me with that intense focus that made my skin burn. Then he nodded. Stay with Sage. Don't leave her sight. He looked at his second. Protect her. With my life, Sage promised. As Rowan vanished into the woods with half the patrol, Sage turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You're either very brave, she said, or completely insane. I looked at the dead cattle, at the terrorized survivors huddled in the far corner of the pasture, at the forest that suddenly seemed full of shadows and threats. Can it be both? I asked. Sage's laugh was short and sharp. Come on, miracle worker. Let's see if you can calm a herd twice in 2 days. We moved toward the cattle, and I pushed everything else away. The fear, the confusion, the memory of Rowan's eyes on mine, and focused on what I could control, one frightened heart at a time. It took 3 hours to settle the herd. 3 hours of patient circling, soft words, and careful movements, while my heart hammered against my ribs, and every shadow in the forest seemed to hold teeth. Sage stayed close, her hand never far from the blade at her hip, her eyes constantly scanning the tree line. The cattle were traumatized, their eyes rolling, their bodies trembling with each distant sound. I couldn't blame them. Whatever had torn through their companions had left a violence in the air that even I could feel, and I was only human. Only human. The phrase echoed in my mind as I worked. It was what I'd always been told, what I'd always believed. But standing here, calming creatures that should have trampled me in their panic, I wondered if only was the right word. You're good at this, Sage said, as we finally herded the last of the cattle toward a more secure pasture closer to the compound. Really good. It's like they trust you instantly. I shrugged, uncomfortable with the observation. Animals are simpler than people. Their fear is honest. You can work with honest fear, and dishonest fear? That's the kind that makes people cruel. Sage was quiet for a moment, studying me with those moss-green eyes. You've seen a lot of cruelty, haven't you? The question was gentle, but it cut deep. Images flashed through my mind. My mother's final days, the villagers who'd helped but never quite welcomed us, the small rejections that built into walls over years. Nothing dramatic. Nothing I could point to and say, this wounded me. Just the steady erosion of belonging until I'd learned to exist on the margins. Enough, I said finally. I've seen enough. We were walking back toward the compound when the patrol returned. I saw them emerging from the forest, 5 wolves in human form, moving with the coordinated grace of predators who'd hunted together for years. Rowan was at their center, and even from a distance, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the grim set of his jaw. They'd found something. And whatever it wasn't good. Report, Sage said as they approached. One of the patrol members, a stocky man with graying hair and scars that spoke of old battles, shook his head. Trail went cold at the river. Whatever it was knew how to cover its tracks. He glanced at Rowan. But we found these. He held out his hand, opening it to reveal 3 objects that made my blood run cold. Claws, but not wolf claws. These were longer, curved differently, with a translucent quality that caught the light strangely, and they smelled wrong. Even I could tell that from several feet away. Like rot and wildflowers, death and spring mixed together until they created something that shouldn't exist. Fae, Rowan said quietly, and the word fell between us like a stone into still water. Sage cursed under her breath. They haven't crossed our borders in decades. Why now? I don't know. Rowan's fingers closed around the claws. But this is a declaration. They didn't just kill cattle. They left these behind for us to find. They want us to know it was them. So we retaliate, another patrol member said, her voice hard. We cross into their territory and make them pay for... No. Rowan's voice cracked like a whip. That's exactly what they want. A reason to escalate, to turn this into a war that will cost us everything. He looked at each of them in turn. We stay vigilant, double the patrols, but we don't attack. Not until we understand what's happening and why. The patrol members didn't look happy, but they nodded. This was what leadership looked like, I realized. Not just strength, but the wisdom to know when not to use it. As the others dispersed to their duties, Rowan's eyes found mine across the space between us. Something passed in that look. Exhaustion, frustration, and underneath it all, a vulnerability that made my chest ache. "Walk with me," he said. Not an order, a request. I looked at Sage, who nodded slightly, and then I was falling into step beside him as he led us away from the compound toward a path that wound through ancient pines. We walked in silence for a while. The forest here was peaceful, untouched by the violence at the boundary. Birds sang in the canopy, sunlight filtered through the needles in golden shafts. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like the calm before a storm. "Tell me about yourself," Rowan said suddenly. "Your life in the village, your family." The request caught me off guard. There's not much to tell. I doubt that. He glanced at me sidelong. "You appear out of a storm, save my cattle, face down wolves without flinching, and calm traumatized animals like you're speaking their language." "That's not nothing, Elena," I sighed, pulling my cloak tighter around myself despite the mild temperature. "My mother raised me alone. My father died before I was born. Some kind of accident in the mountains. She never talked about it much. The memories came slowly, carefully. We lived on the edges of things. Not quite part of the village, but not separate enough to be completely cast out. She taught me about animals, about weather, about listening to the world instead of just hearing it. She sounds wise. She was." My throat tightened. "She died 5 years ago, some kind of fever that came on fast. The village healer tried, but..." I trailed off, the old grief rising like water. Rowan was quiet for a moment, then, "I lost my parents when I was 16. Attacked by a rival pack that wanted our territory." His voice was carefully neutral, but I could hear the old pain underneath. "I became alpha that day, took over leadership of hundreds of wolves when I barely understood how to lead myself." I looked at him, really looked, and saw past the power and presence to the boy who'd had to become a king before he was ready. That must have been terrifying. It was. He stopped walking, turning to face me fully. "Every day for the first 5 years, I was convinced I'd fail them. That I'd make the wrong choice and get people killed. That I wasn't strong enough, smart enough, good enough to fill my father's place. But you did it anyway. Because I had to. Because they needed someone, and I was what they had." His eyes held mine, intense and searching. "You understand that, don't you? Doing what needs to be done even when you're terrified." I thought about yesterday. About walking onto pack territory knowing I could die. About standing in this compound today, surrounded by predators who could tear me apart. About staying here, now, when every logical instinct said to run. "Yes," I whispered. "I understand." Something shifted in his expression. Softened. He reached out slowly, and this time when his hand cupped my cheek, I didn't pull away. His palm was warm, calloused, gentle in a way that seemed impossible for hands that could kill. "Who are you, Elena?" he asked softly. "Really?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never known. I'm just someone who doesn't fit anywhere. Someone who feels too much and sees too much and can't walk away even when she should." "Maybe that's exactly who you're supposed to be." The moment stretched between us, charged with something I didn't have words for. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, and I felt that touch all the way to my bones. This was dangerous. Impossible. He was an alpha king, and I was a village nobody, and there were 1,000 reasons this couldn't be anything more than a howl split the air, distant but urgent, a warning. Rowan's entire body went rigid, his hand dropping from my face as his head snapped toward the sound. Another howl joined the first, then another, building into a chorus of alarm that made my skin prickle. "The compound," he said, already moving. "Something's attacking the compound." We ran. I'd never been a particularly fast runner, but fear gave me speed I didn't know I possessed. Rowan stayed with me, could have easily outpaced me, but he matched my stride, his hand occasionally touching my back to guide or steady me. We burst into the compound to find organized chaos. Wolves in human form were arming themselves, grabbing weapons, forming defensive positions. Children were being herded into the main hall. And at the center of it all, Sage was shouting orders with a voice that carried absolute authority. "What happened?" Rowan demanded as we skidded to a stop beside her. "Southern boundary this time. Different creatures. Not Fae, but something else. They're testing us." Probing for weaknesses, her eyes were hard. 3 different attacks in one day, Rowan. That's not coincidence. That's coordination. How many casualties? None yet. We drove them back before they could breach the inner perimeter. She hesitated. But they're coming back. I can feel it. Rowan's jaw clenched. Triple the guard. I want eyes on every boundary, every access point. No one travels alone. Children and non-combatants stay in the main hall until... Rowan. A young woman approached, her face pale. "We have a problem. The elders are demanding a council. Now, they're saying..." She glanced at me, uncertainty clear in her expression. "They're saying the attack started after she arrived, that her presence here has angered something." The words hit like a physical blow. My presence, my fault. "That's ridiculous," Sage snapped. "She had nothing to do with..." "I know that." Rowan's voice was cold, controlled fury. "But the elders won't care about logic when they're frightened." He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw apology and frustration. "I need to meet with them. Try to calm the situation before it gets worse." "I should go," I said quietly. "Back to the village. If my being here is causing problems..." "No." The word was sharp, absolute. "You're under my protection. That doesn't end because some people are looking for someone to blame." He turned to Sage. "Take her to my quarters. She'll be safest there. Post guards at the door, people I trust. No one gets in without my permission. Rowan, I really think... Please." He looked at me, and there was something almost desperate in his eyes. "Please, Elena. Just... stay. Let me handle the elders. Let me fix this." I wanted to argue. Wanted to insist that I wasn't worth this trouble. That he should focus on protecting his pack instead of one human woman who'd stumbled into something she didn't understand. But the look in his eyes stopped me. So I nodded. Sage led me through the compound, past wolves who watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. We climbed stairs in the main hall to the 2nd floor, down a corridor lined with doors, until we reached one at the very end. "His private quarters," Sage said, pushing it open. "You'll be safe here." The room was larger than my entire cottage, but somehow it didn't feel ostentatious. A massive bed dominated one wall, covered in furs and simple linens. A fireplace crackled with fresh flames. Bookshelves lined another wall, packed with volumes that looked old and well-loved. Large windows overlooked the compound and the mountains beyond. It was a room designed for comfort and solitude. A sanctuary. "Thank you," I said quietly. Sage studied me for a long moment. "He likes you. Really likes you. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Heat flooded my cheeks. "He doesn't know me. Maybe not. But he wants to." She moved toward the door. "For what it's worth, I think you're good for him. He's been alone for so long, carrying everything by himself. Maybe it's time someone helped carry the weight." She left, closing the door behind her, and I was alone in the Alpha King's private sanctuary, while outside, the world seemed to be falling apart. I moved to the window, looking out over the compound. I could see wolves moving with purpose, patrols forming, defenses being reinforced. Could see the main hall where the council was probably happening right now, where Rowan was defending his decision to protect me. A nobody. A human who'd saved some cattle in a storm. Except I was starting to wonder if that was true. Starting to wonder if there was something else at work here, because the timing was too perfect, too deliberate. Attacks starting the same day I arrived. Multiple breaches from different directions. As if something had been waiting for this moment. as if I was the key to something I didn't understand. My reflection stared back at me from the window glass, pale hair catching the firelight, eyes too large in a face that looked younger than my 23 years. I looked like someone who belonged in fairy tales, not in the middle of whatever was happening here. But fairy tales, I'd learned, were rarely about what you looked like. They were about what you chose to do when the wolf came knocking, and right now, I had a choice to make. I could hide here in Rowan's sanctuary, safe and protected while he fought battles on my behalf, or I could step out of the shadows and face whatever was coming, because deep down, in a place I rarely examined, I knew the truth. These attacks weren't coincidence. My presence here had triggered something, and if people were going to be hurt because of me, I needed to understand why. I turned from the window, my decision made. I'd given Rowan an hour, 1 hour to handle his counsel, to try to calm his people. And then I was going to find answers, even if I had to face the monsters alone. The hour passed like molasses. I tried to sit still, tried to be patient, but restlessness drove me to pace the length of Rowan's quarters like a caged animal. The books on his shelves called to me, volumes on pack history, treaties, ancient lore. But I couldn't focus enough to read. My mind kept circling back to the same questions, the same growing certainty that I was somehow at the center of this, but why? What could I possibly have that anyone wanted? I was examining a map on Rowan's desk, hand-drawn, showing territories and boundaries marked in different colored inks, when I heard the shouting, distant at first, then growing louder, angry voices carrying through the compound, through the very walls. I moved to the window and felt my blood turn to ice. A crowd had gathered in the main courtyard, 50 wolves, maybe more, and their body language screamed confrontation. In the center, I could see Rowan, his posture rigid with control. Facing him was a group of older wolves, the elders, I assumed, and between them, Connor, the young man from earlier, the one who'd lost Mara, and he was pointing at the main hall, at me. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. The message was clear in every gesture, every aggressive stance. They wanted me gone, wanted me cast out or worse, and Connor was leading the charge, his grief twisted into rage that needed a target. I watched Rowan shake his head, watched him try to reason with them. But the crowd was growing, more wolves joining with each passing moment. The situation was escalating from council meeting to mob, and Rowan was caught in the middle because of me. The decision formed before I could second-guess it. I couldn't hide here while he fought this battle alone. Couldn't let him sacrifice his relationship with his pack, with people who depended on him, who'd followed him for years, just to protect someone he'd met yesterday. Even if the thought of leaving made my chest ache in ways I didn't want to examine. I moved to the door, tested the handle, locked from the outside, which made sense. Rowan had said to keep me safe, and Sage had taken that literally. The guards outside would never let me pass. But the window. I looked back at it, measuring the distance to the ground. 2 stories up, with nothing but hard-packed earth below, a fall that would break bones if I was lucky, kill me if I wasn't. Unless I didn't fall straight down. The roof of the adjacent building was maybe 6 feet away and 1 story lower. A jump that was possible if I didn't think about it too hard, if I just acted on instinct and faith, and the kind of reckless courage that had brought me here in the first place. My mother's voice whispered through memory. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leap. I opened the window, letting in the cool evening air. Below, the argument was reaching fever pitch. I could hear Rowan's voice now, raised in a way I hadn't heard before, commanding and desperate all at once. She saved our herd. She's done nothing to warrant. Her presence is a curse. That was Connor, his voice breaking. 3 attacks in 1 day. Mara's killer still walks free while you protect this human like she's worth more than one of us. That's enough. But it wasn't enough. I could see it in the way the crowd shifted, in the way more wolves were taking Connor's side. Fear and grief were powerful motivators, and they needed someone to blame. I climbed onto the windowsill, my heart hammering. The jump looked further from up here, the consequences more real. But behind me, I could hear footsteps in the corridor. The guards checking on me, maybe, or someone coming with orders I didn't want to hear. So I jumped. For one breathless moment I was flying. Wind rushing past, the ground impossibly far below, every nerve in my body screaming that this was insane. Then I hit the adjacent roof. The impact drove the air from my lungs, sent me rolling across wooden shingles that scraped my hands and knees. But I didn't fall, didn't break. I lay there for a heartbeat, gasping, then forced myself to move. Getting down from here was easier, a drainage pipe that held my weight, a careful climb. And then I was on the ground, hidden in the shadows between buildings. The crowd was louder now, close enough that I could see individual faces twisted with fear and anger. I moved carefully, keeping to the edges, working my way closer to where Rowan stood facing down his own people. "Not about worth," he was saying, his voice strained. "It's about honor, about keeping our word and protecting those under our care, regardless of species. If we turn on her now, if we let fear make us cruel, then we're no better than the creatures attacking our borders." "Pretty words," one of the elders said, her voice dripping with disdain. "But words don't stop claws, don't bring back the dead. Your father would never have—" "My father isn't here." The pain in those words made my chest constrict. "I am. And I'm telling you that Elena stays under my protection until we understand what's really happening. Then you choose her over your pack." Connor's voice was cold now, controlled in a way that was somehow more frightening than his earlier rage. "You choose an outsider over your own people, over Mara's memory, over everything we are. I choose to do what's right, then maybe you're not fit to lead." The words fell like a blade. Silence crashed over the crowd. Even in my hiding place, I could feel the weight of that challenge, the line that Connor had just crossed. To question an alpha's fitness to rule was to invite combat, to suggest a change in leadership, to start a civil war. Rowan stood frozen, and I could see the calculations running behind his eyes. If he challenged Connor, if he fought him here and now, it would prove Connor's point, that Rowan put his pride above his pack. But if he didn't respond, if he let the challenge stand— The door to the main hall burst open. Sage emerged, running, her face flushed with urgency. "Rowan, the northern boundary—" She skidded to a stop, taking in the scene. "What's happening here?" "A challenge," one of the elders said quietly. "The boy has challenged the Alpha's judgment." "The boy is grieving and looking for someone to hurt," Sage snapped. "And you're all playing right into—" She stopped, her eyes going wide as she looked past the crowd. Past me, toward the northern boundary where she'd just come from, and I saw it too. Lights in the forest, dozens of them, moving between the trees like malevolent stars, not torches. These glowed with colors that shouldn't exist in nature, violet and green and a sickly yellow that made my skin crawl. "They're coming," Sage whispered. "All of them, every boundary at once. This isn't probing anymore. This is an assault." The crowd fractured instantly, conflict forgotten in the face of real threat. Wolves began shifting, that ripple of transformation I'd seen before. Except now it was happening all around me. Dozens of humans becoming dozens of wolves in heartbeats, their forms blurring and reforming into something primal and deadly. Rowan's voice cut through the chaos. "Defensive positions. Protect the hall. Children and elderly inside now. Warriors to the boundaries. Coordinate with patrol leaders." A scream cut him off. High-pitched, terrified, coming from the eastern edge of the compound. And then I saw them. Creatures pouring from the forest like a nightmare made flesh. Some were tall and impossibly thin, with too many joints in their limbs and faces that were beautiful and terrible all at once. The fae that Rowan had mentioned, I realized with cold certainty. But there were others too. Things with scales and things with fur, things that crawled and things that flew, all of them moving with coordinated purpose toward the compound. Toward us. "Elena." I turned to find Rowan racing toward me, his eyes wild with fear that I realized wasn't for himself. "What are you doing out here? You were supposed to stay. I couldn't hide while you—" The building behind us exploded. Not literally, but something hit it with force enough to shatter wood and send splinters flying like deadly rain. I felt Rowan's body cover mine, sheltering me as debris rained down around us. Heat and smoke, and the smell of something burning filled the air. When I looked up, A creature stood where the building had been, 8 feet tall, vaguely humanoid, but wrong in every proportion. Its skin looked like tree bark, ancient and gnarled, and its eyes were the same sickly yellow as the lights in the forest. Changeling, Rowan breathed, and I heard genuine fear in his voice for the first time. Elena, listen to me very carefully. When I move, you run for the hall. Don't look back. Don't stop. The creature's head swiveled toward us with mechanical precision. Its mouth opened, revealing teeth like thorns, and it made a sound that wasn't quite a voice. The girl, it said, and each word felt like insects crawling on my skin. Give us the girl and we leave. Refuse, and we burn this place to ash. My blood turned to ice. The girl. They wanted me. Why? Rowan demanded, placing himself between me and the creature. She's no one. Nothing to you. Why would you? She is everything. The creature's head tilted at an angle no living thing should achieve. She is the key. The bridge. The one who can open what was closed. It took a step closer, and the ground beneath its feet withered and died. We have waited so long, searched so far, and now she walks into our reach like a gift. Around us, the battle raged. I could hear wolves snarling, creatures shrieking, the clash of combat echoing through the compound. But in this moment, in this space between us and the monster, everything else faded away. I don't understand, I said, my voice shaking. What am I? What do you think I can do? You don't know. The creature almost sounded amused. The daughter of between places, the child of 2 worlds. Your mother hid you well, raised you in ignorance, but you cannot hide from what you are forever. My mother. It knew my mother. What do you know about my mother? The words came out harder than I intended, edged with grief and anger I'd been holding back for 5 years. She stole you from us, fled into the human world where we couldn't follow, couldn't claim what was rightfully ours. The creature's eyes fixed on me with hunger that made my soul recoil. But she's gone now, and you've come home. This isn't her home, Rowan snarled. She's under my protection. You want her, you go through me. That can be arranged. The creature moved faster than something that size should be able to move. One moment it was standing there. The next it was on top of Rowan, those thorn teeth snapping toward his throat. But Rowan was an alpha for a reason. He met the attack with inhuman speed, his own body shifting mid-motion, until a massive dark wolf stood where the man had been. They collided with force that shook the ground, tooth and claw against bark and thorn, 2 apex predators locked in combat that was almost too fast to follow. And I stood there, frozen, as the truth crashed over me in waves. My mother had fled from something, had hidden me in the human world, raised me in ignorance of what I was, what I could do. The storms I could feel, the way animals trusted me, the sense I'd always had that I didn't quite belong anywhere. It wasn't because I was broken, it was because I was something else entirely. Elena! Sage appeared beside me, grabbing my arm. We need to get you. No. The word came out with certainty I didn't know I possessed. They want me. If I run, they'll chase. They'll destroy everything trying to get to me. I looked at her, at the compound burning around us, at Rowan fighting a creature that could kill him. I can't let that happen. You can't just surrender yourself to... I'm not surrendering. I pulled free of her grip, my mind racing. My mother hid me from them, taught me to be invisible, to blend in, to never draw attention. The pieces were clicking together now, the pattern emerging from chaos. But maybe that was the wrong lesson. Maybe I don't need to hide. What are you talking about? I didn't answer. Couldn't, because I wasn't entirely sure myself, but something in my chest was waking up, something that had been sleeping for 23 years. It felt like lightning and thunder, like the moment before a storm breaks when the whole world holds its breath. It felt like power. I stepped forward, away from Sage's protection, away from the relative safety of the shadows, into the open space where Rowan and the creature still fought, where blood, red and green mixing impossibly, stained the ground. Stop, I said. My voice shouldn't have carried over the sounds of battle, shouldn't have been audible above the screams and snarls and the roar of flames consuming wooden buildings, but it did. The creature froze. Rowan froze. Around the compound, as if responding to something they couldn't consciously hear, the fighting began to slow, to stop. All eyes turned to me. I stood there, my heart hammering, my pale hair whipping around my face in a wind that came from nowhere. And I felt it, really felt it for the first time in my life. The thing my mother had hidden, the truth she'd protected me from. I wasn't human, not entirely. I was something in between, something that belonged to both worlds and neither, something that could bridge the impossible gap between them. And right now, with lives hanging in the balance, I needed to be brave enough to find out what that meant. "You want me?" I called to the creature, to the others still lingering at the compound's edges. "Fine. But first, you're going to tell me the truth. All of it. What I am. What you want." Why my mother ran. The creature's laugh was like breaking glass. "Brave little bridge. Do you think you can bargain with us? I think you've spent a long time looking for me." I held my ground, even though every instinct screamed to run. "I think if you could just take me by force, you already would have. So yes, I think I can bargain." Silence stretched between us, taut as a wire. Then the creature smiled, and it was the most terrible thing I'd ever seen. "Very well, daughter of Between Places. We will speak. We will tell you truths your mother tried to bury." It gestured toward the forest with one gnarled limb. "Come to the boundary at moonrise, alone, and we will show you what you are." "Elena, no." Rowan started, shifting back to human form despite his wounds. But I held up a hand, stopping him. Because this was my choice to make, my truth to face. "Moonrise," I agreed. "The northern boundary. And no one else gets hurt until then." "Agreed." The creature melted back into the forest like smoke, and with it, the other attackers withdrew. In minutes, the compound was empty of everything except wolves and the destruction they'd left behind. Rowan limped toward me, blood running from a dozen wounds, his eyes blazing with fear and fury and something else I couldn't name. "Are you insane?" he demanded. "You can't go out there alone. You can't trust them to— I can't stay here while people die because of me." I reached out, my hand hovering over one of his wounds. "This is my fault. All of it. They're here because of what I am, whatever that is. And I need to understand. Then I'm coming with you. You can't." They said alone. I don't care what they said. His hand caught mine, pressing it against his chest where his heart hammered against his ribs. "I'm not losing you. Not to them. Not to anything." The intensity in his eyes made it hard to breathe. This man, this alpha king who carried the weight of hundreds of lives, was ready to risk everything for me, a stranger he'd met in a storm. A mystery he didn't understand. "Why?" I whispered. "Why do you care so much?" His answer was simple, devastating. "Because from the moment I saw you standing in that storm, everything changed. You changed me." His thumb brushed across my knuckles. "And I don't know what you are or what's happening or what tomorrow brings. But I know I'm not letting you face it alone." Around us, the compound began to stir back to life. Wolves checking on loved ones, assessing damage, tending to wounds. The crisis had passed, for now. But moonrise was coming, and with it, answers I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. The hours until moonrise passed in a blur of preparation and argument. Rowan refused to let me go alone. I refused to let him risk his life for answers that were mine to find. We went in circles until Sage finally intervened, her voice cutting through our stubborn deadlock with brutal practicality. "You're both right and both wrong," she said, tending to Rowan's wounds with efficient hands. "Elena needs to go. They won't talk if she doesn't, but Rowan can't let his people see him sit back while someone under his protection walks into danger." She looked between us. "So we compromise. Elena goes to the boundary. Rowan and a small group stay close enough to intervene if things go wrong, but far enough that the creatures don't feel threatened." It wasn't perfect, but it was the only solution that didn't end with one of us locked in a room or tied to a chair. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood, I found myself in Rowan's quarters again. Someone had brought me clean clothes. soft leather pants and a tunic that fit surprisingly well, sturdy boots that had seen use but still had life in them, practical clothing for whatever was coming. I braided my hair with shaking hands, watching my reflection in the mirror and trying to see what the creatures saw. What my mother had hidden from me all those years. I just looked like me, pale and uncertain and terrified. A knock at the door, and then Rowan entered without waiting for permission. He'd cleaned up, changed into dark clothing that somehow made him look even more imposing, but his eyes were soft when they found mine. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "Yes, I do." He moved closer until we were standing mere inches apart. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell pine and rain and something uniquely him that made my head spin. "Then promise me something," he said. "Promise me that if things go wrong, if they try to take you or hurt you, you'll run. You'll let me and my wolves handle it, and you'll run as fast and as far as you can. Rowan, please." His hands cupped my face, tilting it up so I had no choice but to meet his eyes. I've lost so many people, my parents, pack members, friends. I can't. His voice roughened. "I can't lose you too, not when I just found you." My heart cracked open. "You barely know me. I know enough." His forehead touched mine, his breath warm against my lips. "I know you're brave and kind and stubborn as hell. I know you risk yourself for others without thinking twice. I know that when you smile, which isn't often enough, it feels like the sun coming out." His thumb brushed my cheekbone, and I know that if something happens to you tonight, I'll tear this world apart trying to get you back. The words hung between us, heavy with meaning neither of us was quite ready to name. But I felt it. That pull, that connection, that sense of rightness that had been growing since the moment our eyes met in the storm. "I promise," I whispered. "If things go wrong, I'll run." His lips brushed my forehead, gentle and reverent. "Thank you." We stood there for a moment longer, wrapped in each other's warmth, stealing peace before the storm. Then Sage's voice called from below, and the moment shattered. It was time. The walk to the northern boundary felt both endless and far too short. Rowan walked beside me, with Sage and 3 other wolves flanking us. The compound had been subdued since the attack. Wolves moving quietly, speaking in low tones, casting glances my way that ranged from fearful to curious, to something that might have been hopeful. Connor stood near the gate as we passed, his face bruised and exhausted. Our eyes met for a brief second, and I saw something shift in his expression. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe understanding, maybe the beginning of it. The forest was dark, shadows deep between the ancient trees. But the moon was rising, fat and bright, turning the world silver and strange. We stopped at a small clearing, maybe 50 yards from where the boundary markers stood. Ancient stones carved with symbols I couldn't read. "This is as far as we go," Rowan said, though everything in his posture screamed that he wanted to follow me further, stay within sight. "If anything happens, I'll scream loud enough to wake the dead," I promised, managing a smile that felt more confident than I was. He caught my hand, squeezed it once, hard, then let me go. I walked the remaining distance alone. The boundary markers hummed with energy I could feel against my skin. Old magic, the kind that predated treaties and civilizations. I stopped just before them, on the wolf territory side, and waited. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then they came. Not just the changeling from earlier, but dozens of creatures emerging from between the trees like they were stepping through curtains. Fae with their impossible beauty and cruel eyes, things made of bark and stone. Beings that glowed with their own light, and at their center, a figure that made all the others seem like shadows. She was tall and elegant, wearing a gown that looked like it was woven from moonlight and spider silk. Her hair cascaded down her back in waves of silver, and her eyes were the color of storm clouds, shifting from gray to violet to the deep blue of twilight. She looked at me, and I felt that gaze pierce straight through to my soul. "Child," she said, and her voice was beautiful and terrible all at once. "Do you know who I am?" "No," I admitted. I am Thessaly, queen of the between places, ruler of the spaces where your world and ours blur together. She tilted her head, studying me with an intensity that made my skin burn. And you, little one, are my granddaughter. The world tilted. Granddaughter. The word echoed in my head, refusing to make sense. My grandmother had been human, had died when I was young. My mother had been human. I was human, wasn't I? I don't understand, I whispered. Your mother was my daughter, Thessaly said, moving closer to the boundary markers. Born of my union with a human man, I loved more than wisdom dictated. She was like you, caught between worlds, belonging fully to neither, and she was precious beyond measure. Pain flickered across those ancient features. When she fell in love with one of my court, when she became pregnant with you, I was overjoyed. A grandchild who would carry both bloodlines, who might finally bridge the divide that has kept our people separate for millennia. But she ran, I said, pieces clicking together. She ran and hid me in the human world. Because she learned the truth, Thessaly's voice hardened, that some in my court did not want a bridge. They wanted a weapon, a tool to break down the barriers completely and allow our world to spill into yours. Consequences be damned. She looked at me with something that might have been regret. Your mother discovered the plot, stole you away in the night, fled to the one place my people couldn't easily follow, into the protection of wolf territory where old treaties held. My mind reeled. The village, it's on the edges of packlands, deliberately. Your mother bargained with the previous Alpha King, Rowan's father. Protection for you both in exchange for service. She tended their cattle, worked their lands, and in return, the wolves kept watch. Kept my court from reaching you, until she died, and the protections weakened, until you grew into your power enough that we could finally sense you. Thessaly's eyes gleamed. You felt the storm coming because you carry storm blood. You calm animals because you speak the language of wild things. You don't fit in the human world because you aren't human. Not entirely. You're Fae, child. And more than that, you're the bridge your mother died protecting you from becoming. Behind me, I could feel Rowan's presence, though I couldn't see him. Could feel his tension, his readiness to intervene. But this was my truth to face, my history to understand. What do you want from me? I asked. I want you to come home. Thessaly extended a hand, and frost formed on the grass where she stood. I want you to take your rightful place in my court. Learn what you are, what you can do. Help me root out those who would use your gift for destruction. Her voice softened. I want to know my granddaughter, the child I thought lost forever. It should have been tempting. Should have answered the question I'd carried my whole life. Where do I belong? But I thought of my mother's choice, her sacrifice. The years she'd spent in exile, raising me in ignorance, protecting me from this very moment. And if I refuse? I asked quietly. Thessaly's expression hardened. Then the faction that wants to use you will never stop hunting. They'll attack that pack, burn that compound, hurt anyone who stands between you and them. Because you're too valuable, child. Too important. You're the key to breaking ancient barriers, whether you choose to be or not. So my choices are come with you, or let innocent people die. Your choices are accept what you are, or keep running forever. She stepped closer, until only the boundary markers stood between us. I won't lie to you. There are those in my court who want to control you, use you. But there are also those, myself included, who want to protect you, guide you, help you understand and control the power that's waking inside you. Her eyes were almost gentle now. You felt it earlier, didn't you? During the attack. That surge of energy, that sense of connection to everything around you. I had. I'd felt something ancient and powerful stirring in my chest, responding to danger and fear and desperate need. If I come with you, I said slowly, what happens to the pack, to Rowan? The attacks stop. The treaties hold. The wolves stay safe in their territory while we sort out the politics of my court. Thessaly's gaze sharpened. But understand this. Once you cross that boundary, once you enter my world fully, you won't be able to leave easily. The between places have rules, and one of them is that those with Fae blood are bound to the land in ways humans aren't. You mean I'd be trapped? I mean you'd be home. I turned, looking back toward where I knew Rowan waited. I couldn't see him in the shadows, but I felt him. Felt that connection we'd forged in less than 2 days. That impossible pull that made no sense but felt more real than anything in my life. And I understood, with crushing clarity, what this choice really meant. If I went with Thessaly, I'd save the pack, end the attacks, protect Rowan and Sage and even Connor and all the others who'd looked at me with fear and hope and everything between. I'd learn what I was, claim the heritage my mother had died protecting me from, but I'd lose the chance to become whatever I might be with Rowan, lose the possibility of belonging I'd felt in his presence. In this place that felt more like home than anywhere I'd ever lived. Elena. Thessaly's voice was urgent now. Dawn comes. I need your answer. Behind me, I heard movement. Rowan emerging from the shadows, unable to stay back any longer. His hand found mine, threading our fingers together with desperate strength. Don't, he said roughly. Don't go with her. We'll find another way. We'll fight them all if we have to. But don't. You can't fight all of Faye, I said softly, looking up at him. At this man who'd given me protection and acceptance and something that felt dangerously close to love in the span of 2 days. They'll destroy everything you've built, everyone you've sworn to protect. I don't care. Yes, you do. I touched his face, memorizing the angles, the way his eyes reflected moonlight. You're an alpha. You put your pack first. It's who you are. I smiled, though my heart was breaking. It's one of the things I couldn't finish. Couldn't say the word that would make this hurt even more. Elena, please. His forehead pressed to mine. There has to be another way. And suddenly, impossibly, I knew there was. My mother had run, had hidden, had chosen protection over power, safety over truth, and maybe that had been right for her time, for her circumstances. But I wasn't my mother. I turned back to Thessaly, an idea forming that was either brilliant or completely insane. You said I'm a bridge, I said. That I can connect your world in this one. Yes. And the faction that wants to use me, they want to break down the barriers completely. Let the Fae world spill into this one. That's their goal. Yes, but that's not what you want. Thessaly studied me carefully. No. I want balance, connection without chaos, the ability for our peoples to interact without destroying each other. I took a deep breath. Then here's my offer. I'll come with you. I'll learn what I am, develop this power, become the bridge you say I can be. I squeezed Rowan's hand, but not permanently, not trapped. I'll split my time, part in your world, learning from you, part in this world, with the pack. And I'll use this power to do what my mother couldn't, to actually build that bridge, make it real and stable and safe. That's impossible, Thessaly said. No one has ever, because no one's ever tried. My voice grew stronger. Everyone keeps choosing sides, human or Fae, your world or this one. But I'm both, and maybe that's the point. Maybe I'm supposed to stop choosing and start connecting. Silence fell over the clearing. Then Thessaly laughed, a sound like wind chimes and breaking crystal. You have your mother's courage and your grandfather's stubborn optimism. She looked at me with something that might have been pride. Very well, granddaughter. We'll try your impossible bridge. But know this, it will be hard, dangerous. There will be those in both worlds who want you to fail. I know. And you'll still try? I looked at Rowan, at the hope dawning in his eyes, looked at the compound in the distance, at the wolves who'd fought to protect me despite their fear. Looked at Thessaly, and the Fae gathered behind her, creatures of impossible beauty and terrible power. I'll try, I said, because someone has to, and apparently, that someone is me. Thessaly extended her hand across the boundary. Then come, child. Your training begins tonight. I'll return you to the pack by sunrise. Consider it a show of good faith. I looked at Rowan one last time. I'll come back. You'd better. His hand cupped my cheek. Because I'm not done figuring out what you are to me. What am I? I whispered. His smile was small, genuine, filled with promise. Everything. You're everything. He kissed me then, soft and brief and sweet. A seal on a promise we were both making, to try, to fight, to bridge the impossible divide between our worlds. Then I stepped across the boundary, and the world shifted. 3 months later, the compound had changed, not dramatically. Wolves were still wolves, their routines and rituals largely unchanged. But small things were different now. A carved marker at the northern boundary, where Fae were permitted to enter for the monthly gatherings I'd helped establish. Gardens that grew with impossible vigor thanks to Fae magic I was learning to channel. Children, both wolf and the occasional Fae youngster, playing together in the courtyard under careful supervision. And me. I had changed most of all. I stood on the terrace of Rowan's quarters. Our quarters now, though I still felt a thrill every time I thought of it that way. Watching the sun rise over mountains I'd learned to love. My hair was still pale, still defied any attempt to tame it. But I carried myself differently now. With confidence I'd earned through grueling training with Thessaly, through learning to harness the power that sang in my blood. I was a bridge, literally and figuratively, and it was exhausting and exhilarating, and more meaningful than anything I'd ever done. Arms wrapped around me from behind, and Rowan's chin came to rest on my shoulder. Couldn't sleep? Too much to think about. I leaned back into his warmth. The council meeting with the Southern Pact today, the Fae delegation tomorrow, the trade negotiations can wait until after breakfast, he murmured, pressing a kiss to my neck that made my pulse skip. You're allowed to rest, you know, so are you. His laugh rumbled through his chest into my back. We're both terrible at it. We stood there as the sun painted the world gold. Two broken people who'd found unexpected healing in each other. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about this new world we were building was perfect. There were still those who didn't trust the bridge between species. Still attacks, though far fewer now. Still days when I wondered if I was enough for this impossible task. But then, Rowan would look at me the way he was looking at me now, like I was a miracle and a mystery and exactly what he'd been waiting for. And I remembered the truth. I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to be brave enough to keep trying. I love you, I said, the words still new enough to feel like magic on my tongue. I love you too, he replied, turning me in his arms so he could kiss me properly. My storm girl, my bridge, my Elena. Below us, the compound stirred to life. Wolves and Fae, working together in ways that would have been impossible 4 months ago, all because one woman couldn't walk away from cattle in a storm. All because one alpha king chose to see potential instead of threat. The world was changing. We were changing it. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I belonged. Everywhere. Between, in the spaces where different worlds touched and created something new. I was a bridge. And bridges, I'd learned, were built to bring people home.